Hello everyone. If you're watching this for the first time, my name is Adrienne and I am a public school teacher turned homeschool mom. So I created this channel to encourage and support other homeschool moms on their journey. This video is going to be embracing learning outside of the classroom. As a previous teacher, I was guilty of bringing the school atmosphere into my home when I started homeschooling, and that is definitely not what you want to do. So the classroom is very limited in what you can do and what you can access, and just the number of students that you have on a daily basis really limits your ability. But when you're homeschooling, the possibilities are endless because you have the flexibility, you have the freedom, you know your kids the best. There's just so many perks and benefits. I have lots of videos where I talk about more about homeschooling specifically, so head on over and check those out if you didn't already. Make sure you are subscribing so you're getting notified when I'm posting videos every week, and we are going to jump in to some tips for bringing the classroom outside. The first thing is to look for experiences, right? We all learn by doing a lot better and a lot quicker than reading or being told what to do. The percentages of what you retain when you're just listening or even when you're writing are very low compared to when you're actually experiencing something and doing something. So if you're trying to learn how to ride a bike, for example, the best way to do that is to get on a bike, right? You don't want to read books about riding a bike or watch a video about someone showing you how to ride a bike. Those might be helpful, but when it comes down to the time to ride the bike, you need the practice, right? You need to get on the bike and do it. Another example is fractions. When you're in school, in a traditional school classroom, you're probably working on fractions with little manipulatives, maybe a worksheet, maybe you do something fun. It depends on the teacher and the school, really, how creative they can be. I've heard of teachers doing pizzas where the kids got to pick the different toppings and then they talked about fractions. That's super fun, and you can do that at home. But instead of just reading about fractions or doing worksheets and practicing fractions, you can be very creative, right? So fractions are just part of a whole. So anything that you can make part of a whole, you can do that and incorporate that into your homeschool day. So make it fun. Bake some cookies, and when you're doing recipes, they're reading fractions. If you're doubling your recipe, they're multiplying fractions. Maybe you bake a huge batch of cookies and you have 4 kids and you divide them up between the 4 kids and they get to eat all the cookies. Or maybe you have different toppings on your cookies. Some of them are chocolate chip, some of them maybe you do cinnamon sugar or oatmeal, and then you can talk about fractions with the cookies while they're eating them to help them be excited about their learning. You could also order pizza and do half of it a certain topping and half of it another, and you can incorporate fractions there. If you have kids that like to polish their nails, you can polish their nails different colors and talk about the fractions there. So there are so many different possibilities, and you can really get creative with it instead of just giving them a worksheet and saying practice your fractions, because that's right? So you want to make it exciting whenever you can. Of course, you don't want to overdo it and burn yourself out with super fun activities for every single lesson every single day. But if you're learning about fractions, give them the practice, show them how it is, give them some examples, some real world examples, and then pick something fun to do maybe at the end of the week or maybe in the beginning when you introduce fractions to kind of hook them in and see that it's not just a boring math exercise, that it's actually applicable to their life. Another tip is to ask questions. You want your kids to be curious because that's what inspires them to have a lifelong learning journey. We're never finished learning. We're always retaining new information or learning new skills, and you're just encouraging them to develop this when they're young so that they will continue to question things and be curious in a positive way. So maybe you are just sitting there with your kids and you say, I wonder what would happen if, and then you just talk about whatever pops into your head. If you have any kids, you know how random they can be, so I'm sure that they could have a whole thing planned out with this. Your conversations might go in crazy directions, so just be prepared for that. But it just kind of gets them thinking about what if. And then you could also say, I wonder why. wonder why the clouds are in the sky, or depending on your kid's level, and that could really spur a fun conversation about how their little brains are making connections and working to understand their world better, because that's possibly one of your goals as a homeschool parent, making them able to adapt and understand their world. And if they're asking questions and staying curious, then learning is going to be a fun process and something that they can explore further, and not just open up to page 3 and finish your math work. It's going to be more of an adventure for them. If you have kids that like to explore and experiment, you can channel that and create a wonderful learning experience for them where they're not stuck in a box of worksheets and workbooks and completing this assignment. That does have a place, and it is important for them to practice, but that shouldn't be all of it. That should not be everything, every day, every lesson, every subject. Another example is to follow a recipe so they kind of get the flow and the idea of how it goes, and then create and write down your own recipe. So getting them exploring in the kitchen is another great way to kind of intertwine the learning with life skills, right? They're going to have to learn to be functional in a kitchen unless they're going to order out every meal, which our family does not recommend. Maybe that's your jam, but that's not how we roll. So if they're following the recipe, they're getting practice in the kitchen. They're most likely getting exposure to fractions and reading and reasoning and problem solving. So there's lots of things wrapped up with that. And then creating their own recipe, they can practice writing it down. So you have the list of ingredients and then the directions. Writing out directions for someone who's never made their recipe can be very overcomplicated in their mind sometimes. I've seen lots of funny videos where teachers have their students write directions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then they follow the directions, and it's quite hilarious. If you've never seen those, I encourage you to look that up on probably YouTube has tons of videos, but they're hilarious. So then after they write down their recipe, if you have the time and the ingredients, try it out. Follow their recipe to a T and see if it turns out you're actually testing what their communication skills are at that point. Obviously, if you have kids that don't know how to write, you can modify this, but that just kind of gives you an idea of how you can take something that you're learning or something that you're already doing and tweak it a little bit and turn it into a learning experience. So the learning experiences are all around. And you can incorporate them and sneak them in so that your children might not even know that they're doing school. They might think that they're taking a break to bake with mom in the kitchen, and really there are lots of hidden lessons there. I do have two kind of things to caution. As a former teacher, I can be sucked into this forcing everything possible into a learning experience, and you don't want to do that either, because you don't want to squash their little spirits and their just time to be a kid. Not everything has to be a learning experience. You don't have to make everything into a lesson. Sometimes things just present themselves in a way where it's super easy and it just kind of flows, but if they're sitting there reading a book and just enjoying it, enjoying the book, you do not have to insert yourself in that situation and start asking them questions about the setting and the plot and having them identify characters and talking about all the things about the book. Just let them be. Let them sit and enjoy the book. You don't have to make everything a learning experience. And the second thing I want to caution you with is to not overwhelm them, especially when they're younger, with too much vocabulary. We always pointed out things to our kids, like labeling things, and that's kind of overwhelming when you are so focused on words and they are just like little sponges absorbing everything. But when you're working with them and they're super young, you want to start simple. So if you're looking at a book, maybe you focus on 2 words. Every time they see something red, they point and they say red. They're going to have a better mastery of that word and that concept if you're only focusing on a couple compared to if you did 12, right? So when they're younger, you want to keep it simple and keep it focused on just a few things so that they can master them a lot quicker and a lot easier, and they're not overwhelmed trying to remember which word they're looking for and what it looks like and all the things. So hope you got value from that. Don't forget to shoot me a message or drop a comment if you have a question, if you have something that you want me to cover, and I will see you in the next video.